We are few in number. It looks like we have about 50 folks online, which is great. We know a lot of people are at John Hattie this morning. So if you could share this information that you learned today for any of your folks that might need it, that would be great. Let me just go through our agenda this morning. We're going to start off with WIDA, talking about WIDA. There's some data security information. It's in a PowerPoint that was sent out attached. So we're not going to go through that information during this webinar today, but please look at those attached slides. Then Tracy's going to be talking about DLM. We have some SAGE math that we're going to be talking about, ACT, SAGE assessment observation. I know that we've had a lot of questions about what's going on with that, and so we'll talk about that as well. I have some accountability legislation updates, and I may move that around. It just depends on what our time is like today. Then we'll have David talking about the SAGE testing windows. And then at the end of today, we're going to have Terry do the SAGE benchmark training. Now, she's done this before, so those of you that want to stay online and come through the training with her, that would be great. But after the testing windows, if you've already done the SAGE benchmark training and you're not interested in that, we put that at the end because that's going to take a little bit of time. So for those of you that want to hang around for that. So that's our agenda this morning. Appreciate everybody being here, and we will get started. And Julie Benson will be talking first. Thank you.
Let's do it, sound check.
Can everybody hear me?
Keep talking, keep talking.
I'm going to talk about WIDA for Sid. She's at John Hattie, so are we good?
Ask Robin Hedgecock if she could hear you.
Robin Hedgecock, can you hear me? We think we're having troubles.
Keep talking, Emily says it sounds okay.
Oh, good. Okay, I guess it sounds okay. So we're good.
They didn't hear me, that's fine.
That's the screen you're presenting from. The one with the green border around it.
This one?
No, that one
This
over
one?
there.
But can I move it here?
No. So click the back arrow on that thing.
There we go.
And then
Arrows?
yep, there you go.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. Like I said, Sid is at John Hattie, so if you have questions about WIDA, you're going to want to email her because I'm not going to know the answers to them. So we're in the middle of the testing window right now. The final day for testing is March 10th. You will not be able to get on to do any more testing after that day, so make sure you're completed then. Materials need to be shipped back by March 24th. Information for returning the materials is in the TAM. WIDA went through a new standard setting process last summer with state, district, school, and classroom experts. Standard setting is expected to impact access for EL's 2.0 score in 2017 in two ways. Some student scores may go down, and fewer students may exit the program for support. So be aware of that. This slide, there we go. This slide attempts to illustrate the new standard setting. What was originally proficient was a hurdle for students, and now the hurdle is much more rigorous. They're still being assessed on the same things, but the expectations have increased. And it's kind of like the same thing when we moved from CRTs to SAGE. The rigor and expectations increase for our students. So this slide gives you some tips for looking at the new scoring reports, things to think about as you address not as many students exiting. Number 5 actually gives you a link of resources of how you can communicate to your stakeholders about the changes. So this slide illustrates that the scale didn't change, just the meaning of the scores changed. So last year, a 5.0 on Access 1 would only be about a 4.2 on Access 2.0 this year. This is another state's data. We're going to be getting data like this for Utah. They ran the test scoring it both ways under the 1.0 and the 2.0. So proficiency level 5 is where they exit EL status. In first grade, not a huge change, but by third grade, you can see that a lot of students would have exited under the 1.0, but now won't. So the top students exited last year and will have less exiting this year because of the increased rigor. So there will be a lot fewer students who will exit this year than they have in the past. We'll also be getting reports at the student level that will tell us individual scores. Once we have those, we will transfer them to you through Move It. So this is a screenshot of the WIDA's webpage about the new screener. So there's a new screener that's going to be starting in the fall. There will be no more WAPT. If you go to the webpage and click the link at the bottom, that bottom gray box that has that will have the webinar schedule for the training. There's also 3 full-day trainings. You just need to attend one of them because it's the same training each day. And there's only 35 slots available. So if you're interested in attending, you'll need to sign up soon. The full-day training will describe the screener, administration procedures, accommodations, and then extensive practice with scoring the speaking and writing domains. With Access 2.0, DRC scores the speaking and writing, but with the screener, the test administrator will score the speaking and writing portions. So the full day will give you lots of practice scoring actual student responses. So if you're interested in that, sign up as soon as you can. If you can't attend one of the full day in-person trainings, they do have 2 live webinars. Here are the dates, March 3rd and April 7th. And then if you can't attend either one of those, the webinar will be recorded, so you can access that at any time. I think it was sent out as attachments, some flyers about the screeners and the different trainings, so you can see those there. And then now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to writing. So just to give you a little background information, the first year of writing, everything was human scored because we did range finding. The second year of writing, same thing because we made changes to the prompt, so we did human scoring again. Last year, we went to machine scored with 20% that we did a validation study, so it was just randomized students' responses were selected for human scoring. This year, we're doing scoring verification, so the 20% will not be randomized. We're actually going to be very selective of which students' responses will get selected for human scoring. If a student's response is selected, it will not receive an immediate score. Their response will be sent to DRC to be human scored, and then they'll get a score within 5 days. The papers that are going to be human scored will be scores that we have a low confidence on, or if they get a condition code like there's not enough there, it's off topic, it's in a different language, things like that. So just know that if your student gets pulled for human scoring, if their response gets pulled for human scoring, they won't receive a score, and then after 5 days, when we get the score back, they will receive a score and it will be an ORS. So if you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and email me or call me and I can give you more information there. And with that, I think we're...
Any questions? Do you have any questions?
Oh, are there any questions? Oh, DRC is the company that does WIDA. So they're the ones that score. They're the ones that have been scoring the Access 1.0 to 2.0, the items that need to be hand scored.
That's a lot of information, so I'll contact you.
Yeah, and again, if you have any questions about WIDA, email Sid, Sydney Carter, and she can give you more information. If you have more information, or if you need more information about the writing, you can email or call me.
Hey. Hello. I'm just going over one slide today. I'm Whitney Phillips, Chief Privacy Officer. I wanted to let you all know about our second webinar. You'll see slides from the first webinar with the AD memo that just went out announcing this. So the second webinar will be Wednesday, March 1st from 10 to 11. I plan on having that time slot the first Wednesday of every month from 10 to 11 open to get through all of the information you need to be compliant with state and federal law. So you can right-click the link there. You can also, many of you have already gotten onto a distribution list. This is a list I use to send out about, let's say, maybe twice a month, send out information kind of hot off the press and announce these webinars as well. You can add yourself to the list if you are in charge of data security and privacy, and also the web page there at USBE. We're moving that web page over to UEN to give it's a little easier to work with their services there. Again, there is a requirement, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, that each LEA must have a student data manager. That person would be in charge of making sure that they have, every LEA has policies and procedures in place. If you don't know who that is in your LEA, find out. If it's a small LEA or a charter school, it might be you, because assessment directors would wear a similar hat. So if you have any questions, there's my contact information. Are there any questions from you now? I don't see any. Okay, well, in a couple of weeks, we'll be chatting, and so, yeah, hope to see you there. Let's see. Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, so a little DLM update. On the slide, I'm not going to read through these, but I've provided some key steps for your test administrators to remember when they are getting ready to prepare for the administration of the DLM, which is coming up very quickly. So just double checking student information, looking at how they've scheduled testing for their kiddos, making sure test administrators have received their test information pages, getting student names and passwords. So you can find more information about any of those steps on the DLM webpage in the Test Administration Manual or the Educator Portal User Guide. So if you have any test administrators that are unclear about any of those steps or what they need to do, they can also contact me as well. DLM is providing a new track test progress field in Educator Portal, so this is super awesome. Next to the tickets, all of your test administrators will be able to see that their students have taken 3 out of the 5 or 2 out of 5 testlets for each ELA and math. So this was something that that teachers have been really asking for, and DLM has provided for us. So let your test administrators know that this will be available to them this year. And just a quick update on the special education website for assessment. We have added the new scribe guidelines and the accommodation request form for scribe. You can find that now on the special education assessment webpage. We've also got the interpreter guidelines for standardized assessment up there as well. So any of you guys that are using, maybe using interpreters, just know that there's some new guidance for them. I've also added the flowcharts that we've kind of presented over the last couple months, talking about how students and teachers get rostered to DLM, talking about the critical steps that teachers need to follow to administer, and then there's also a flowchart now with the 6 steps for spring assessment that I just covered. Those are all on the website too. And the accommodations and participation policy finally went in front of the board last week, and they gave it a thumbs up. They actually read it. So that has now been updated on the website as well. On the slide here I have in the next 2 weeks, because we weren't quite sure when it would get posted, but it is now posted, so you can take a look at that. Nothing as far as accommodations have changed in the policy. We updated some of the accountability stuff, so let me know if you have any questions. It's stamped draft for right now, so we need to keep it stamped draft for the next 30 days. So if you have any feedback, let me know. And that is all I have for DLM. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, where's the camera on this one?
Yes, right here.
Okay, so I had just have a quick, we're going to reiterate something that has already been there. This isn't an update. We've just heard a lot from the curriculum side, as well as some math specialists, that there's some misunderstanding about the 11th grade opt-out rule as it applies to courses versus grades. In ELA, it isn't as much of a problem because most students are on the grade level. In math, where students are off, or different students are in the same courses, there's some confusion. Just remember that the rule that was passed was that if your LEA has decided to opt the students out at 11th grade, it is an 11th grade decision. It is not based off of the 11th grade standard course. In math, that would be secondary math 3. So if you've opted your students out, it isn't that you're not going to test secondary math 3, it's that you're not going to assess juniors whatever course they're in. So just a couple of examples that we can go through. So let's say you have a secondary math class. There's 3 sophomores, 26 juniors, and 7 seniors. Question is, who tests? Well, sophomores and seniors test, the juniors don't. You may be in a situation where if you've done this opt-out for math, you will have to test some of the students in the class and you won't test others. Okay, second example, you have a secondary math 2 class and it's all your juniors, so they're a year ahead of the game essentially. Who tests? Or they're a year behind the game, sorry. Well, nobody tests because they're all juniors, so they're all opted out. Final example, you have a secondary math 1 class and half of them are juniors and half of them are seniors, and please tell me you don't have this course, but because they're 2 or 3 years behind the game here. Well, your seniors test and your juniors don't. Now that only applies if you've decided at the LEA level to opt out the students or the juniors. You may not have done that, in which case everybody would test. And also keep in mind that there is the rule that you never have to retest a student who has already taken the test. So in this last example, your seniors may not have to test if they've already been testing. Okay, are there any questions?
My understanding is that seniors don't have to test, say, to that changed.
I don't believe that was ever a rule. It is course-based. Now there is in the actual core codes, I do believe that seniors who are in ELA 11 are not pre-registered for the course. But in math it has always been that seniors test.
What do we mark in special codes?
So if you need to notify USBE that you have made that decision to opt out the students, and we will handle it automatically.
We should already know that.
Yes, we should have already known that. If you haven't notified us, then your students are going to be enrolled in the actual test, and they should be tested. High school courses are, oh, that's you. And David will answer that. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, in that case, we'll go to Jared.
Ask David if he wants to just set it or continue.
All right, so I have some ACT information, just reminders of the website and the schedule of events document. There have been questions about ordering materials, so I've provided a link there for ordering additional materials. The shipment should be one where it has secure and non-secure. So if you're looking for pre-ID labels, they should be in the one shipment that also has the secure materials as well. I just wanted to provide a reminder of the window for when the non-test, kind of the pre-test section of ACT needs to be done, and then just the final, well, not a final, but initial test date will be February 28th. Any questions?
What about ACT?
Okay, then I'm going to cover for Kim. So we wanted to talk about the on-site observations. Kim and I will be coming out to those sites and observing. There's information here as far as the bullets. Kim, I understand, has contacted those that we will be coming out to observe. She needs the subject and grade level is your choice, but what we need are dates and times and the school where we can come and observe the testing happening. So if you can let Kim know if you already haven't, there's her email. And actually, I think she's included. So there's a few LEAs that she has contacted but not heard back from. So if you could provide us the school, a date, and a time when the testing will take place. It can be elementary, it can be secondary, middle, and it doesn't matter. Just whatever's available that we can come and observe. And then here's some other schools. So those of you in red, please email Kim as soon as possible when a date and time of when we can come observe testing. And if you have any questions, you can let Kim Rathke know, and she's very good at getting back with you. And then here's just an example of what the observation tool will be. There's just some questions. If you're extremely nervous about this, Kim could provide a PDF of what we're going to be looking for, what we're going to be asking, so that it's not a secret. Just let her know and she can get that to you. And, final reminder, the test administration manual for the spring summative has been posted. It should be posted to the SAGE portal by the end of the week. It's also going to be posted on the USBE website as well. Oop. Where am I going? Let's go back.
Is that me?
Yep, Joellen. So any questions for Kim or myself, ACT or the SAGE test observations?
Okay, good morning. Let's see, where am I? Oh, you're over here, okay.
Your camera's here.
My camera's here. Okay. So I wanted to throw up this slide again about the SAGE assessments. We still keep getting a lot of questions. I know that right now during the legislative session, we're hearing a lot about testing and accountability, which I'm going to talk about. But I wanted to throw this slide up here one more time just to make sure that everybody's really clear, because I keep getting questions about this. So this spring, the SAGE is going to be exactly the same as it's been for the last 3 years. We're going to be testing math, science, and ELA. And ELA has 2 writing prompts all the way through grades 3 through 11. And of course, Jared's just talked about the ACT 11. There's no writing in the ACT this year. And so that's just, everything is just the same. Next year, it's going to switch a little bit in that we'll have SAGE summative for 3 through 8. Considering the legislation that I'll talk about in just a minute has to pass, we will pick up ACT Aspire for 9th and 10th grade, and then ACT 11 for 11th grade, just the regular ACT statewide test. The ACT Aspire and 9 and 10 both have a writing component, and you can see what those all of the different tests are there. And we will pick up writing in ACT 11 for the regular ACT test. The writing is very different than the SAGE writing. It's writing to a prompt rather than responding to stimulus. So that is different. In the SAGE summative for 3 through 8, we will drop 1 writing prompt. So everybody will still be tested in 3 through 8, all the writing through all the grades, except that it goes to 1 prompt. Then in 2019, we will have a new statewide summative assessment system. We will be using the same questions. The questions will be from our item bank. The platform may be the same. It may be different. We don't know. It just depends on the vendors that respond to our new RFP. And then writing will, the way the current legislation is written, if it's passed, they'll go to writing in grades 5 and 8 only. Then you'll have writing in grades in Aspire 9 and 10 and writing in ACT 11. So that's the plan, and please feel free to share this slide with anyone and everyone in your LEAs. or at your school so that they know what the testing plan is, because we do hear a lot, and I know it's hard when you're going through transitions. Oh, how did I do that?
Hit the up arrow in the top left. The back area.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 220 today. Oh, first of all, there are actually two accountability bills that are being considered right now. The first one is House Bill 241, and I didn't prepare a lot of slides on that one because it's a little more open. This is Representative Marie Polson's bill. Many of you, some of you, I don't know, may have read it. What it does is it removes, we still have accountability, but the new language in her bill removes the school grade, and it talks about a rating, and it gives a lot of latitude to the school board to determine what accountability will look like going forward. So I think that a lot of people really liked this bill. We had the PTA that spoke out for it on Monday. UEA spoke for it on Monday, and several other large groups spoke for it. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to get on and read House Bill 241. The bill that's coming out, I think it came out yesterday or the day before, is Senate Bill 220, and this is the one that's really prescriptive, and it's over 1,000 lines long, and so you can really get lost in the circles of of what's been trying to be stated here. So this bill is sponsored by Senator Milner. It's a Senate bill. It's Senate Bill 220. And so what I wanted to do is go through and explain to you what this bill does and what this looks like, and try to put it in some layman's terms for you. This bill actually incorporates all of, and I know I've had some questions about this, about what currently is being proposed in ESSA. Of course, right now, with the Department of Ed and the changes that are happening with the Department of Ed, or not, we don't know. We're not sure exactly which one of those accountability pieces, if some, all, or none, that we're going to be held accountable to. But this bill, this is the state bill, and what this attempts to do is bring together all of our accountability systems. So it brings together PACE, school grading, and the federal accountability. Now you'll probably, which would be great, wouldn't it be great to have one accountability system? We will probably still have two ratings if the feds require us to test all 95%, because the opt-out and parents being able to opt out is still in state law. So because of that opt-out issue, we would probably run everything exactly the same way, but you might have two different participation rates, or it might look slightly different depending on who opts out. But let me talk just a little bit about what the elements of this bill are. So again, this does have, right now it has school grades in it, but it also adds a rating indicator. So an A school represents an exemplary school, a B would represent a commendable school, a C would represent a typical school, a D would represent a developing school, and an F would represent a critical needs school. And I'll talk more about that, but basically it's attaching a descriptor to the letter grade. So that's the first thing we notice. The second thing, that turned out really different. It looks different on mine than it does on this. So for grades 3 through 8, you're going to have achievement and growth, like we've always had, and what we call an equitable educational opportunity. And under that would be English language learners and the growth of the lowest 25%. So growth achievement is a little different. Achievement's the same, growth is a little different. Now, what you would see here, and when you start to get into the bill, you'll see points and percentages, and you can get kind of lost in that. But basically, think about it as the whole pie. So achievement is worth around 37%. The growth would be worth 37%. And then you would see the growth of the lowest 25% and English learner progress broken out this way. Now, the only thing that's different here is if you have a school that has fewer than 10 English learners, then that English learner progress piece goes away for that school. So we have approximately 67% of schools that have 10 or more. So the rest of you, about 33% of you in grades 3 through 8, would not be held accountable for those English learners. So we talked about a neutrality piece for a little bit, but I think this is the way that it came out in the language of this bill. Now, I want you to know that the State Board has not taken a position on either House Bill 241 or SB 220. So it's going to be a little bit interesting to see which of these actually comes out of the legislation, but I wanted to break this one down for you because of its complexity. In high school, and by the way, if you remember, our old school grading was worth 600 points in elementary, 900 in high school. This breaks it down so that in grades 3 through 8, it's a total of 150 points. In high school, it's 225. And this is how the points and percentages are broken out in high school. You have achievement and growth that are worth half, and then you have some secondary or post-secondary readiness indicators, which would be coursework, graduation, and ACT. And then again, you have the English learner progress and the growth of the lowest 25%. Now, when I say growth of the lowest 25%, what we're talking about is the students who scored in the bottom 25% at any school of performance. So every school has a bottom 25% and they can focus on it. So before in accountability, we always looked at just the below proficient kids. This one, it doesn't matter where they score. If we're going to be looking at the lowest 25% of each school. Okay. I almost sneezed. Just give me a minute. Okay. There, it went away. Okay, so again, for high schools, we have achievement, which is measured by performance on the SAGE 3 through 8, ELA, Math, and Science, and the Aspire 9 and 10. So it's the percent proficient and ACT Aspire 9 and 10. We don't really have cuts on those yet. That's still to be determined, and that's still to see if the legislation passes. Growth has, and this is the same that is true of the elementary, and I didn't stop and talk about this point, but let me do it now. So growth is not only talks about the growth on the statewide assessment as compared to other students with similar prior assessment scores. That's the SGP. Remember that? But now we will also be looking at the student's performance as it's equal to or exceeds a student's academic growth target. So we can do this, we call them SGTs, and it's basically if a student is below proficient, it's what takes them to get to be proficient in 3 years. They get an actual target and a scaled score that teachers can actually look at, which is I think a real positive thing. If they're already proficient, it tells you what you have to keep up. So it's a catch up or keep up with a scaled score attached so that teachers can see the trajectory that students need to make each year, along with an SGP. Okay? Question.
So the lowest 25% could include kids with a 32 ACT if the school as a whole is high.
Potentially. Yep, potentially. But this was a way to be more equitable across all schools in Utah, because all schools in Utah have a lowest 25%. And, you know, there may not need to be a whole bunch. If you have a super high scoring school, you may not need to have a whole lot of intervention. However, if you have a school that has a lot of kids that are just barely close to proficient, it might be a real area for you to really focus on. If you have a school that's highly impacted and you have 50 or 60 or 70% of kids that are below proficient, it really gives you that point where you can focus in on a group of students, the lowest group of students, to provide intervention. So that's basically what they're thinking of. All right, the indicators here for the equitable educational opportunity are the same. English learner growth, and we're going to talk about this. We haven't included ELLs before and I say we, I'm just talking about this bill, has not included, or accountability legislation has not included English language learners or anything on the WIDA score. So basically right now, the growth for ELLs would be based on the student's progress derived from their performance on the WIDA assessment of academic language, based on progress from year to year of a student's score. Now, the WIDA folks have come out with what they feel like is acceptable growth for each level. And I think it's listed in the legislation itself, but maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's like level 1 is 29 points. From level 2 to level 3 is 19 points. And I can get you all of that. But it's what is acceptable growth based on the WIDA new assessment. And I think those growth pieces are new, and I can share them with you at the next assessment directors meeting. And again, the growth of the lowest 25% would not include the student growth target piece. It would only include the SGPs on that piece. Okay? Let's see. Are they still working on how growth score would be calculated? How would you compare growth between ACT Aspire and ACT? Actually, between ACT Aspire and ACT, there is already a growth metric, and those two tests are predictive. Where we would have some trickiness is between 8th grade SAGE and Aspire. That still has to be worked out. And what actually is considered, acceptable growth on ACT and ACT Aspire. None of that work has happened yet, but technically it can happen, and we will be working through those pieces. Okay? And I know this is a ton of information, so as you read through it, you may want to read through these slides again, and other questions might come to you, so email me the questions that you have. I'd be more than happy to answer them, or have a phone call, pick up and call me, or text me, whatever would be good. Now, in high school, and I always felt like the Grading Utah schools never accurately captured what was happening at a high school, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. One of the ways to mitigate that is to think about what's happening for all of those kids in post-secondary readiness. So post-secondary readiness in this legislation is broken out into 3 chunks. One of the chunks is, right now we know that you have to have the high school, let me start over again. You have to have the college and career ready benchmark for each of the ACT tests, which is really hard to do. We know statewide we have about 17% of our kids that are meeting all 4 benchmarks. We have about 50 to 60% of our kids that meet the English benchmark, fewer that meet the math and science benchmarks. So this would eliminate that piece of it, and what it would do instead would be looking at the percent of students who receive a composite score of 18 or above. So it lowers that whole thing to an 18, and it would be looking at every student who had an 18 or above. Then we would also be looking at what we call advanced coursework. So it's the percentage of a school students who achieve at least one of the following, not all, but just one. So a C or a better in an AP course, a C or a better in a CE course, concurrent enrollment, a C or better in an IB course, or a completion of the CTE educational pathway. So all of those would be considered getting the credit in the advanced coursework. And then lastly, and I can talk more about that, there's probably some little nuances that you'll want to be aware of. Graduation rate is and it's just our basic 4-year graduation rate, so it's a percentage of the school students who graduate in 4 years. And then there's this little 10% bonus, and that's 10% of the points allocated for high school graduation. Up to that could be bonus points for the additional students that you pull in who will graduate in 5 years. How will K-9 students be graded? That's a really good question. We have all of these different configurations. We have, K-8 schools, we have K-9 schools, we have K-12 schools, and none of that has been decided. But typically in the past, and what we've done is they've had 2 ratings. They had the 3-8 rating and then the 9-12 rating. So, how would a K-9 school be graded? Probably the K-8, and because it doesn't have a graduating class, then you wouldn't have another rating just for that 9th grade. So that's probably how that would happen, okay? And those kids, wherever they went to high school, would be considered part of the cohort when they enter that high school. And those post-secondary indicators would follow them wherever they went to high school. I hope that answers the question. And then I know that there's been a lot of folks that have been really concerned because we don't include in accountability anything around K through 3. So what we would have here, and the way that this legislation is written, is that we would report on a couple of other indicators for everyone. And so for elementary schools, while it wouldn't be calculated, it would be reported the percent of students who read on grade level in grades 1 through 3. High schools would report performance on the AP exam, so whatever their pass rates were on their AP exams. So those would be the two that we would report on for both systems. And then a school may include in the school's report card 2 self-reported, board-approved, what we call school quality indicators. And it could include student and parent engagement, chronic absenteeism, school climate, supports for students at risk of academic failure, and extracurricular activities. So there'll probably be a pretty large list that the board would approve, and then a school could pick any 2 of those that they would like to report on. And so this is a way to have some things on a report card that will be public-facing for your schools and communities that would not be calculated in a school's overall rating. So I hope that makes sense. Then one of the ideas that's been floated right now is, because this is a lot of work to redesign a whole report card that brings together and coalesces everything that we've been doing over the past 6 or 7 years. And so right now folks are talking about what they call a design challenge that we would put out there to high school, colleges, universities, and that it would be a challenge that, and we would have a competition basically to create a relevant, adaptable, easy-to-use report that would do all of these kinds of things for the general public. So that would be kind of interesting to see what happens with that. So in talking about it, we've got some expertise here at the state office. We have tons of expertise out there in the LEAs that could be part of that. But we're thinking, hey, why not open it up statewide? So LEAs, schools, colleges, anybody in Utah could be part of this design challenge to help us design a report card that could do there's lots of nifty ones out there that could help us do that. The other thing that we were thinking about and had encouraged in either House Bill 241 or in this legislation, Senate Bill 220, is this idea of what we call a standard setting. So lots of people think that, and I think it has been happened over the past 6 years, is that grades seem arbitrary. Who gets an A, who gets a B, what school's a C, a D, or an F, they get labeled. And what we would do is after the first year of data, probably sometime this summer, and then again probably after we bring in the ACT package as well, or SAT or whatever happens with that legislation, we might do this again. But it's to help us to arrive at some overall determinations. So one of the big pushbacks, and I know one of the big issues that we've had, is the legislation, the way it's currently written, ratchets everybody up, right? I don't know how many of you, of your schools were C schools, and then all of a sudden they're a D school, or they were B schools, and all of a sudden they became C schools this last year because this bar arbitrarily jumped. When 65% of schools were A's and B's, then it jumped. And I don't think anybody was happy with that at all. I mean, I think we were all unhappy about it. And so what this would actually do is the board would engage in a criteria, so it would be criterion, not norms, the way it is now, a setting process to establish performance thresholds for the overall ratings. So basically what would happen is you bring a whole group of stakeholders together, and legislators, the governors, school boards, school districts, charter schools, etc., and you would establish performance thresholds based on a school's performance against particular criteria. So what does an A school look like, or a commendable school look like? And we could get some real buy-in and some real strength from folks in the field to say, looking at all these metrics and looking at growth and proficiency and all of these other different indicators, ELs, what do we think an A school looks like? And then you could actually draw some lines in the sand that people could actually live with and not have a bar that jumps each and every year. So this idea of standard setting, I think, is a really critical one, and that we hope in whatever system, whatever of these accountability bills pass, that we would be able to engage in standard setting around that. So that is a lot of information in a very few minutes. So is there, there's some questions. Okay. Has anyone thought about having the grade be a running 3-year or a 5-year score? In small schools, they fluctuate because the sample size is so small. You know, that's a really good question. I know that some states do indicators that last for several years. I don't believe in the way that either of these two legislations has been considered, that piece of it's in there. So, you know, if you have thoughts or questions or wonderings or some great ideas, please feel free to contact either of these legislators. And they have I know they're up on the Hill every day, until March 9th when this whole thing ends, not soon enough. And their aides and other people are there to help solicit information. So that was the last thought I was going to say, is if you have any information or any input that you or anyone from your LEAs or schools would like to provide, please, now is the time to get up there and talk to your legislators about this accountability legislation. And I know that there's, in one of the bills, and it could be in both, that depending upon how small the school was, that they would not necessarily be included in this accountability system. So anyway, there's lots of decisions to be made no matter what happens, how this is operationalized. There'd be a lot to go through. Anyway, so any other questions that I can answer?